There is a moment almost everyone experiences, but very few recognize while it is happening. A message sits unread. A phone call goes unanswered. An apology is postponed, because tomorrow feels guaranteed. A dream is delayed because there always seems to be another chance. In those ordinary moments, nothing appears urgent. Life moves forward, exactly as expected. Then one day, something changes. The opportunity disappears. The relationship grows distant. The conversation that seemed unimportant suddenly becomes the one you wish you had never ignored. This isn't a story about one person. It's about a pattern repeated across millions of lives every single day. It isn't driven by bad intentions or lack of intelligence. Instead, it comes from the way the human brain naturally processes time, emotion, and uncertainty. Psychologists have spent decades studying why people often delay the actions that matter most. Surprisingly, the answer has very little to do with laziness. Instead, it involves complex mental shortcuts that help us survive daily life, but sometimes work against us when emotions are involved. The strange part is that most regrets don't begin with dramatic mistakes. They begin with silence, a conversation that never happened, a decision that kept getting postponed, a feeling that stayed hidden. And by the time people realize what those moments truly meant, they can no longer change them. Researchers studying human behavior have consistently found that regret is one of the most powerful emotions people experience over a lifetime. Unlike fear, which focuses on immediate danger, regret forces the mind to revisit the past, imagining different outcomes that will never exist. This process has a name. Psychologists call it counterfactual thinking. It is the brain's habit of creating alternate versions of reality. If only I had called. If only I had listened. If only I had acted sooner. These thoughts may sound simple, but they reveal something much deeper about how people understand their own lives. The human brain is constantly searching for meaning. When something important is lost, it naturally tries to rewrite history, hoping to reduce emotional pain. Ironically, this process often has the opposite effect. Instead of providing comfort, it strengthens the feeling that things could have been different. That is why missed opportunities often remain in memory longer than successful moments. Success becomes part of everyday life. Regret stays unfinished. This explains something many people find confusing. Why can one forgotten conversation stay in your mind for years, while hundreds of ordinary days disappear from memory? The answer lies in how emotional experiences are stored. Neuroscientists have discovered that emotionally significant events activate memory systems more intensely than routine experiences. When strong emotions are attached to uncertainty or unfinished situations, the brain keeps returning to them, almost like an open file waiting to be completed. Unfortunately, some files never close. Think about how often people assume there will always be more time to reconnect, more time to explain, more time to forgive, more time to begin something they've wanted to do for years. This belief feels comforting because it reduces immediate pressure. Yet it also creates one of the biggest psychological illusions people experience. The illusion of unlimited tomorrows. No one consciously believes tomorrow is guaranteed. Yet many daily decisions quietly assume that it is. Behavioral scientists have observed this tendency across cultures and age groups. People consistently place greater value on future opportunities than present ones, even when there is no evidence those future opportunities will actually exist. This is not irrational. It is simply how the brain tries to manage uncertainty. Choosing later often feels emotionally safer than choosing now. If you delay a difficult conversation, you avoid immediate discomfort. If you postpone a risky decision, you avoid immediate fear. If you ignore an emotional problem, you avoid immediate vulnerability. Each delay creates temporary relief. The brain interprets that relief as success. But temporary comfort often produces long-term consequences. This is where one of psychology's most fascinating ideas begins to appear. Human beings are remarkably skilled at protecting themselves from short-term emotional pain. Sometimes they become so successful at avoiding discomfort that they accidentally avoid growth itself. Imagine standing before two doors. One leads to an uncomfortable conversation that could improve your future. The other allows you to walk away without feeling anxious today. Most people naturally choose the second door, not because they don't care, because the human nervous system is designed to reduce immediate stress before considering future outcomes. In ancient environments, this strategy often improved survival. In modern relationships and personal decisions, it can quietly create regret. Researchers studying emotional avoidance have repeatedly found that avoided problems rarely disappear. Instead, they usually become larger, more complicated, and emotionally heavier over time. Silence grows, distance grows, misunderstandings grow. Eventually, people no longer remember exactly when things changed. They only remember that they did. History is full of examples showing how small decisions can quietly shape entire lives. Many successful entrepreneurs have spoken about opportunities that almost slipped away because they hesitated. Athletes often describe championships decided by tiny moments of commitment. Scientists sometimes spend years pursuing ideas that others ignored because the first step seemed too uncertain. Although every story is different, they often share one hidden pattern. The defining moment rarely looked important when it first appeared. It looked ordinary. That may be one of the most surprising truths about human life. The moments that transform us usually don't announce themselves. They don't arrive with dramatic music. They don't come with warnings. Most appear disguised as ordinary afternoons, routine conversations, or simple decisions that seem easy to postpone. Only later does their importance become obvious. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as hindsight bias. Once people know the outcome, they believe they should have known all along. In reality, the future is almost never that clear while it is unfolding. This misunderstanding causes many people to judge themselves unfairly. They believe they failed because they lacked intelligence or courage. More often, they simply experience the same psychological biases that influence nearly everyone. Understanding these patterns doesn't erase regret, but it changes something important. It replaces self-blame with awareness. Awareness creates the possibility of making different choices in the future, because every day presents countless moments that appear insignificant. A conversation waiting to happen. A goal waiting to begin. A decision waiting to be made. Most will seem ordinary. A few will quietly shape the years ahead. The difficult part is knowing which is which before time reveals the answer. And that raises an even bigger question. If nearly everyone understands that time is limited, why do so many intelligent people continue delaying the actions they know matter most? The answer lies deeper than motivation alone, and it begins with the hidden psychological forces that influence nearly every decision we make, without us even realizing it. If understanding the value of time were enough, regret would be rare. Most people already know that relationships require attention. They understand that important goals demand effort. They recognize that opportunities do not last forever. Yet despite this awareness, many still delay the conversations, decisions, and actions that matter most. Why? The answer isn't simply procrastination. It is a combination of psychological processes that have evolved over thousands of years. These mental habits often protect us in the short term, but they can quietly shape the course of our lives in ways we don't immediately notice. One of the strongest influences is something psychologists call present bias. Present bias is the tendency to give greater importance to what feels good right now than to what will benefit us in the future. Imagine someone who wants to repair a damaged friendship. They know reaching out could improve the relationship, but they also know the conversation might be uncomfortable. The discomfort is immediate, while the reward is uncertain and delayed. The brain naturally focuses on the immediate emotion. As a result, waiting until tomorrow feels easier than acting today. Then tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. Eventually, enough time passes that reaching out feels even more difficult than before. The challenge has grown, even though nothing dramatic happened overnight. This pattern appears in nearly every area of life. People delay medical checkups because they feel healthy today. Students postpone studying because the exam feels far away. Professionals avoid difficult decisions because the current situation seems manageable. The action itself is rarely impossible. The emotional cost of beginning simply feels larger than the emotional cost of waiting. Behavioral researchers have repeatedly found that humans often choose smaller immediate rewards over larger future rewards, even when they understand the long-term consequences. This doesn't mean people are irrational. It means the brain is designed to respond strongly to the present moment. Another important factor is uncertainty. The human brain prefers predictable outcomes. When the result of an action cannot be guaranteed, hesitation often follows. Consider a job application. Someone may have the skills, experience, and qualifications, yet they hesitate because rejection feels possible. If they never apply, they never face rejection. At least, that is how the brain interprets the situation. In reality, avoiding the application also guarantees that the opportunity is lost. The mind often treats action as risk, while overlooking the risks of inaction. This imbalance influences countless decisions throughout life. Researchers studying decision-making have observed that people frequently overestimate the emotional impact of negative outcomes. Before a difficult conversation, many imagine embarrassment, conflict, or disappointment. After the conversation actually happens, They often report that the experience was far less stressful than expected. The anticipation was worse than reality. This gap between expectation and experience explains why fear can become such a powerful barrier. The brain prepares for the worst because preparing once helped our ancestors survive dangerous environments. Modern life, however, presents very different challenges. Many of today's fears involve social situations rather than physical threats. The body still reacts with the same stress response: a racing heartbeat, tense muscles, an urge to avoid the situation, even when no real danger exists. Another fascinating concept is known as loss aversion. Studies suggest that people often experience the pain of losing something more intensely than the satisfaction of gaining something of equal value. This tendency influences far more than financial decisions. Imagine someone considering a career change. The potential benefits may include greater fulfillment, better opportunities, or improved work-life balance. Yet the possibility of losing stability feels more emotionally significant. The mind gives greater weight to what might disappear than to what might be gained. As a result, many remain in situations that no longer help them grow. The same principle appears in relationships. People sometimes avoid honest conversations because they fear losing harmony, even if the silence slowly damages trust over time. Ironically, the effort to avoid immediate loss can increase the chance of greater loss later. Human behavior is filled with these quiet contradictions. We avoid difficult conversations to preserve relationships, yet relationships often become stronger through honest communication. We avoid challenges to protect confidence, yet confidence usually grows by overcoming challenges. We wait for perfect timing, yet perfect timing rarely arrives. These patterns reveal something important. The greatest obstacle is often not external circumstances. It is the way the mind interprets those circumstances. Real-life examples demonstrate this repeatedly. Many inventors describe years of failed experiments before achieving success. What separated them from others was not the absence of uncertainty. It was their willingness to continue despite uncertainty. Athletes often train for thousands of hours without knowing whether they will ever reach the highest level. Authors may spend years writing books before receiving recognition. Scientists frequently test ideas that fail repeatedly before discovering meaningful results. These stories are sometimes presented as examples of extraordinary determination, but they also reveal an important psychological truth. Progress rarely begins with certainty. It begins with action, despite uncertainty. That distinction matters. Waiting until every doubt disappears may feel logical, but it often leads to endless delay. Another reason people hesitate is something known as the spotlight effect. Research suggests that individuals tend to overestimate how much other people notice their mistakes, appearance, or awkward moments. Think about the last time someone stumbled over their words during a presentation. They may remember that moment for years. Most people in the audience probably forgot it within days. The mind creates the impression that everyone is paying close attention. In reality, most people are focused on their own concerns. Recognizing this can be surprisingly freeing. Many fears become smaller once we understand that the audience inside our imagination is often much larger than the audience in real life. There is also another force working quietly beneath the surface: habits. Human behavior depends less on motivation than many people assume. Daily routines shape decisions automatically. When avoiding difficult tasks becomes a habit, hesitation starts to feel normal. Likewise, when taking small actions becomes a habit, progress begins to feel natural. Psychologists often emphasize that lasting change rarely happens through one dramatic decision. It usually happens through repeated small choices. One conversation, one application, one apology, one step forward. These actions may seem insignificant in isolation. Together, they gradually change the direction of a person's life. Perhaps the most encouraging discovery from behavioral science is that awareness itself changes behavior. When people recognize the mental shortcuts influencing their decisions, they become better equipped to question those impulses. Instead of automatically delaying action, they pause and ask a different question. Am I avoiding this because it is truly the wrong decision? Or am I avoiding it because discomfort feels larger than it really is? That single question can interrupt patterns that have lasted for years. It shifts attention from immediate emotion to long-term consequences. And once that shift begins, the future starts to look different. Not because uncertainty disappears, but because uncertainty is no longer allowed to make every important decision. Understanding why we delay is only the beginning. The more important question is what we can actually do about it. Because knowing the psychology behind regret has little value unless it helps us make better choices before those moments become memories. Understanding why people hesitate is valuable, But understanding alone rarely changes behavior. Knowledge creates awareness. Action creates results. That may be one of the simplest lessons in psychology, yet it is also one of the hardest to practice. Most people do not regret what they learned. They regret what they never acted on. The encouraging news is that avoiding regret does not require dramatic changes overnight. In fact, research on human behavior suggests that lasting improvement usually begins with small, consistent actions rather than life-changing decisions. The goal is not to become fearless. The goal is to become willing to act even when uncertainty exists. One practical strategy is surprisingly simple. Reduce the distance between intention and action. Imagine you remember someone you haven't spoken to in months. Instead of telling yourself you'll reach out someday, send a short message today. If you have an idea you've wanted to explore, write down the first step instead of planning the entire journey. If an important conversation has been waiting for the perfect moment, consider whether waiting is actually helping or simply making the conversation more difficult. Small actions have a unique psychological advantage. They lower resistance. The brain often views a major task as overwhelming, but it is much more willing to accept a small, manageable step. Behavioral scientists sometimes describe this as reducing activation energy, the amount of mental effort required to begin. Once movement starts, continuing often becomes easier. Another valuable habit is learning to separate facts from assumptions. The human mind fills gaps with stories. Someone doesn't reply to a message. The mind assumes they're upset. A coworker seems quiet. The mind assumes they are disappointed. A friend cancels plans. The mind assumes the relationship is changing. Yet these conclusions are often built on incomplete information. The reality may be completely different. They may be busy. They may be tired. They may be dealing with challenges that have nothing to do with us. This is why healthy communication matters so much. Clear conversations prevent misunderstandings from becoming lasting beliefs. Instead of assuming, ask. Instead of guessing, clarify. Instead of letting silence create its own explanation, create space for honest discussion. Strong relationships, whether personal or professional, are rarely built on perfect communication. They are built on consistent communication. Mistakes happen. Misunderstandings happen. What matters most is the willingness to address them before they quietly grow into distance. Another lesson supported by psychology is learning to become comfortable with imperfection. Many people delay important decisions because they are waiting for certainty. The perfect words, the perfect opportunity, the perfect plan, the perfect version of themselves. But perfection is not a requirement for progress. In many cases, waiting for perfection simply becomes another form of avoidance. History offers countless examples of remarkable achievements that began imperfectly. Businesses often started with limited resources. Books began as rough drafts. Scientific discoveries were built through repeated experiments, many of which failed before succeeding. Growth has never required perfection. It has always required persistence. This perspective changes the meaning of mistakes. Instead of viewing mistakes as evidence of failure, they become evidence of participation. You cannot improve at something you never attempt. You cannot strengthen a relationship through conversations that never happen. You cannot discover new opportunities while remaining completely still. Every meaningful step carries some possibility of disappointment, but every meaningful step also carries the possibility of growth. Psychologists studying resilience have found that people recover from setbacks more effectively than they often predict. Before failure, the mind imagines permanent damage. After failure, many individuals adapt, learn, and continue far more successfully than expected. This ability is known as psychological resilience. It is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to move forward despite pain. Recognizing this changes the role of fear. Fear becomes information, not instruction. It may signal that something feels uncertain. It does not automatically mean that action should stop. Another practical habit involves paying closer attention to the present. Many regrets grow because attention is always focused somewhere else. People rush through conversations while thinking about work. They spend time with family while checking notifications. They postpone meaningful experiences because they believe there will always be another opportunity. Modern life makes distraction incredibly easy. Technology has created extraordinary ways to connect with people across the world. At the same time, it can quietly reduce the quality of the conversations happening right beside us. Being present does not require extraordinary effort. Sometimes it means putting the phone away during dinner, listening without planning the next response, giving full attention to the person speaking. These moments may appear ordinary, yet they often become the memories people value most years later. Research consistently shows that the quality of relationships is one of the strongest predictors of long-term well-being. Not the number of achievements, not the size of a paycheck, not public recognition. Meaningful human connection continues to stand among the most important contributors to a fulfilling life. That does not mean every relationship will last forever. People grow, circumstances change, some paths naturally separate. Avoiding regret is not about controlling every outcome. It is about knowing that when something truly mattered, you gave it honesty, effort, and attention while the opportunity still existed. There is another important truth that often receives less attention. Sometimes moving forward is the right decision. Not every opportunity should be chased. Not every relationship should continue. Not every goal remains meaningful forever. Growth also requires learning when to let go. The difference is intentionality. Walking away after thoughtful reflection is very different from walking away because fear made the decision for you. When choices are guided by clarity instead of avoidance, they are less likely to become lasting regrets. As this journey through human psychology comes to an end, one idea stands above the rest. Life is shaped less by extraordinary moments than by ordinary decisions repeated over time. A conversation started today. A kind word offered without expecting anything in return. A difficult decision faced instead of postponed. A habit improved one day at a time. These actions rarely make headlines, yet they quietly influence the direction of our lives. The title of this documentary may have sounded like a warning. In reality, it is an invitation to pause before making another decision on autopilot. To recognize that while none of us can change yesterday, every one of us still has influence over what happens next. The future is not built all at once. It is built one decision, one conversation, and one action at a time. If this documentary gave you a new perspective on regret, communication, and the psychology behind everyday decisions, consider sharing it with someone who might find it valuable. And if you enjoy thoughtful documentaries that explore psychology, human behavior, and the science behind the choices we make, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember that some of life's most meaningful changes begin with a single decision made today.